When putting two nations like Japan and Russia against each other, one would assume that the larger and stronger one would naturally win. However, the Russo-Japanese War of 1904 through 1905 was different because not only did Russia lose, but it was an overwhelming victory for Japan on all fronts. During a time when European imperialism was dominant throughout Asia, this decisive victory by Japan disturbed the one-sided dominance of the region and brought another major player into this game of oppression and exploitation. But first, some context. By the end of the 17th century, Russia had established its control over Siberia and sought access to the Pacific via the Amur region, but China denied it. Russia's presence in the region increased significantly to a point where it was de facto controlled by Russia, and as the Chinese were facing many internal and external conflicts, they were unable to defend that territory. Therefore, Russia forced China to sign the unequal Treaty of Aigun, which ceded everything north of the Amur River, as well as another large part of land to the east of the Ussuri River, where the city of Vladivostok was built, parallel to the construction of the Trans-Siberian Railway. Meanwhile, Japan's Meiji Restoration fueled rapid industrialization and modernization. It was rapidly increasing in strength, whereas China was gradually walking towards its downfall. Japan's ambitions in Korea were challenged by China, and so the First Sino-Japanese War of 1894 through 1895 was fought. Japan came out on top and forced China to give it the Kwantung Peninsula, on which Port Arthur stands, together with Taiwan and the Pescadores Islands. This was faced with backlash from Russia, so it called on France and Germany for the Triple Intervention. As a result, Japan was forced to give up the Kwantung Peninsula and Port Arthur, following which Russia and China formed an alliance, where Russia also obtained the right to extend the Trans-Siberian Railway through Manchuria to Vladivostok and Port Arthur. All the intervention in Asia by Europeans, which threatened the sovereignty of China, led to the Boxer Rebellion. It aimed to not only remove the European powers from China, but also to overthrow the Qing government. The name Boxer came from the Europeans referring to the Chinese secret society known as the Yi He Quan, righteous and harmonious fists, as such because of their boxing style and calisthenic rituals, which they believed would make them immortal. Spoiler alert, they didn't. In response, the Eight-Nation Alliance was formed, which comprised of Russia, Britain, France, Germany, Italy, Austria-Hungary, Japan, and the United States. While they invaded under the pretense of protecting their embassies, it didn't take long for the Eight Nations to start treating the Geneva Convention like a to-do list. In the end, China was forced into yet another unfair treaty, and Russia sent around 170,000 troops to Manchuria and never withdrew them, effectively occupying the region. Feeling strong and unstoppable, Russia decided to pursue some more expansionism in Korea, which had its independence guaranteed by Japan. Noticing that Russia was up to something, Japan decided to begin arming its nation. However, the Russians didn't pay much attention to them. This was one of their bigger mistakes, as on February 4th, 1904, prior to the official declaration of war, Admiral Togo Heihachiro attacked Port Arthur, which Russia had previously taken control of, and besieged it. The Japanese later split the Russian fleet between Port Arthur and Vladivostok. Japan was quick to capitalize on this incompetence and invaded Manchuria, reaching the Yalu River and having their first decisive victory. This battle was the first instance of an Asian country defeating a Western power. After this failure, General Alexei Kuropatkin was put in charge of the operation, who I'm sure my Bulgarian viewers are having a laugh at because of his name. His overly cautious strategy cost him the Battle of Nanshan and got his forces in Port Arthur split off from the main force. During this time, Japan decided to siege Port Arthur and wait until the Russians gave out, which they did despite having 3 months left of provisions. The defenders demonstrated the exceptional usefulness and deadliness of the machine gun against infantry charges in this siege, but some people just never learn. Looking at you, World War I Europeans. Following this success, Japan went into the final and biggest land battle of the whole war, after around a year of sieging Port Arthur. The Battle of Mukden had 330,000 Russian men and 1,475 guns on one side, and 270,000 Japanese men and 1,062 guns on Japan's side. Japan ultimately defeated the Russians and forced the Russians to flee, with both sides sustaining heavy casualties. Another major victory for Japan was at Tsushima. Russia had dispatched the Baltic Fleet, nearly starting a war between Britain and itself, and after a long trip around the world, the fleet headed straight for the Tsushima Strait, with 8 battleships, including 4 new battleships of the Borodino class, as well as cruisers, destroyers, and other auxiliaries for a total of 38 ships. Admiral Togo Heihachiro knew about the incoming fleet and ambushed it, crossing the T through it and effectively annihilating 2/3 of the Russian fleet, losing 8 battleships, many smaller vessels, and more than 5,000 men, while Japan only lost 3 torpedo boats and 116 men. Only 3 Russian vessels escaped to Vladivostok, while 6 others fled to neutral ports. This was a devastating loss for the Russians, who were forced to surrender after this. This all ended with the Treaty of Portsmouth in 1905, the one in Maine. Japan gained control of the Kwantung Peninsula and Port Arthur, as well as half of Sakhalin Island. Southern Manchuria was ceded to China. Japan's control of Korea was recognized, and after some ethnic cleansing, it was annexed in 1910. Russia not only lost territory, but the regime lost its already dwindling legitimacy, and after the revolution of 1905, Tsar Nicholas II was forced to issue the October Manifesto, which turned Russia from an absolute monarchy into a constitutional monarchy. This all culminated in the Russian Revolution of 1917. This war marked Japan's rise as a global power and highlighted the vulnerabilities of Imperial Russia leading up to the October Revolution. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. Why is this so hard to say? As on February 4th, 1904, prior to the official declaration of war, Admiral Tokuhei Hachiro attacked Pearl Harbor? Bro! Russia had dispatched the Baltic Fleet, nearly starting a war between Britain and itself, and after a long trip around the world, the fleet headed straight for Tsushima, straight with 8 battleships, including 4 new battleships of the This war marked Japan's rise as a global power and highlighted the vulnerabilities of Imperial Russia leading up to the October. Wow, I messed up on the last word!